Hello everyone. The work, Final Fantasy, that saved Square, which was once in a financial crisis. More than 30 years have already passed since the history of Final Fantasy began. This work was developed as a game where the fortunes of the company were at stake, and later became a series, becoming a long-selling series. I think it is now one of the cultures that Japan is proud of. FF6 and 7 were worldwide hits and popularized Japanese RPG games around the world. FF10, which touched many people, also became a worldwide hit. The online game, FF14 Inches, became a hit after its renewal, and is now played by more than 25 million people worldwide. However, the demands placed on games change with the times. Final Fantasy has continued to take on new challenges with each work, but some users say that it's no longer as fun as it used to be. Is that really so? Will the Final Fantasy continue to decline? Or will it bring yet another innovation to the gaming industry? In this video, I would like to take a look at the history of FF series, while touching on each work. Everyone's favorite FF work is different, and you may notice something by looking back at the transition of the series. Glory, decline, fall, many things have been said about the FF series. I would like to look back on FF's past and future together with FF fans. Let's have fun! The beginning of the FF series can be said to be FF1 to 3. The 1980s is said to be the golden age of Japanese video games. The NES, released in 1983, became so popular that it became a social phenomenon. Until then, game consoles found in coffee shops and game centers were the mainstream. Demand for home video game consoles increased, and eventually the popularity of RPG games began to heat up. The first, Dragon Quest, was released in 1986. At the time, Dragon Quest was overwhelmingly popular. It was a time when many game production companies were trying to catch up with DG. In such an era, Square released Final Fantasy. The year after the release of DQ1, Square released Final Fantasy I. At that time, Square's business performance was poor and it is said that it was on the verge of bankruptcy. Employees at the time apparently thought, this work may be the last. It was named Final Fantasy from such thoughts of the employees. Hironobu Sakaguchi, who acted as a director on many FF titles. Akitoshi Kawadu, the creator of the FFL series. FFA director Koichi Ishii. FF was created with the participation of all these people and their collective efforts. About 540,000 were sold in Japan, and Square avoided bankruptcy. FF1 is an RPG that imitates other games while creating an original style. It was said to have a different kind of fun than the previously released DQ1, and won many fans. DQ1 battles one person, but FF1 has multiple monsters appearing in a party of 4. It was said to have a different kind of fun than the previously released DQ1, and won many fans. The story revolves around 4 crystals and 4 warriors. The goal is to defeat Chaos, which plans to destroy the world by blocking the power of the crystal, and restore world peace. As an RPG, this is a classic story. In 1988, the year after the release of FF1, FF2 was released. Approximately 760,000 were sold in Japan, making it a much bigger hit than its predecessor. In Japan, there has been a game magazine called Famitsu for a long time. The magazine has a corner where 4 members of the editorial team play and evaluate the games. FF2 has been inducted into the Hall of Fame, which is given to games that score 35 to 40 points. There are 4 main characters, including the main character Froniel. The story begins when the world's peace is threatened by the dictatorial nation of the Palamikian Empire. The Froniels fight to defeat the Palamikian Empire. FF2 has a different system than Level Up. It's called the Proficiency System. The more select attack during battle, the higher strength value becomes and become a warrior type. The more use black magic, the more intelligence. It is a system where character's value increases and grow into a mage type. This was a system with a lot of freedom, allowing the player to develop into the character they wanted. This system was epic making at the time, and was also the greatest feature of FF2. This system had a great influence on later works such as the FFL series. There are also 16 levels of proficiency in weapons, armor, magic. The higher proficiency, the more powerful weapons and magic will be, and the more defensive armor will be. Chocobo is loved by fans as the mascot of the FF series. Chocobo first appeared in the series in FF2. FF3 was released in April 1990. Final Fantasy as NES software will be the last. Although the story and system are based on FF1, both are upgraded. It sold about 1.4 million in Japan, making it the first million seller in the series. I think there are many people, including myself, whose first FF was FF3. Until then, RPG had always been the industry leader in Dragon Quest. However, due to the huge hit of FF3, it was said that the recognition of FF at that time was on par with DQ. Crystals all over the world have lost their light and the monsters have been set free. A story about 4 boys traveling to regain the light of the crystal. The story is a classic RPG, and the outline is similar to FF1. Even though it's an RPG with classic content, why did it sell 1.4 million? It is said that the reason for this is the introduction of job change system. The first job for the 4 main characters Onion Knight. It is now possible to change the job midway through FF3. As the story progresses, the number of jobs that can be selected will increase. The job change system was very innovative at the time and fascinated many fans, including myself. Additionally, FF3 has a famous episode during its development. The high-speed movement of the airship Nautilus was realized by Iranian programmer Nasir Gebel. It's unthinkable now, but at the time, game software only had a capacity of 256 kilobytes. This is a capacity that can only hold one 300,000 pixel photo. It was believed that it was impossible to move the airship at high speed. Nasir has realized 8 times the normal speed. It was made possible by a bug. Nasir Gebel is still talked about as a genius programmer among FF fans. Remake versions of FF1 and 2 were released from an early stage, but a remake version of FF3 was not released for a long time. It is said that the code that Nasir programmed was so difficult to decipher that it was difficult to create a remake version. The remake version of FF3 was released in 2006, 6 years after its release was announced. I believe that the reason why FF3 remains one of the most popular works in the series is because so many of these talented staff were involved. The last dungeon of FF3 is also famous for making players cry. It takes about 2 hours to clear the game, but there are no save points, so if you're wiped out, you'll have to start over from the beginning. It seems that there was originally a plan to set up a save point in this dungeon. But debugger Suzuki's comments angered director Sakaguchi, and as a result, there were no save point. And this became famous as a dungeon in the FF series where you have to play for a long time. These 3 works were the beginning of the FF series and had a great influence on later works. What happened to FF, which evolved with each new work and steadily increased sales? Let's take a look at the next work. The 1990s in Japan is said to be the golden age of RPGs. The transition from NES to SNES brought dramatic advances in video and music. In the early 1990s, many classic RPGs were released. While each manufacturer has released many masterpieces, the FF series has also brought a masterpiece to the world. That is FF4, 5 and 6. I think some people might say, these works are the heyday of Final Fantasy. In this video, we'll talk about these works as FF's growth era. FF4 was the first FF for SNES. Sales in Japan were approximately 1.44 million, which did not increase that much from the previous work FF3. However, the overall level of completion of the game is extremely high, and I feel that it is a work that started to focus on the story. This now familiar logo that reads Final Fantasy was adopted from FF4. The logo reflects the theme of each work. Note that the FF4 logo features his best friend Kane instead of the main character Cecil. If I have a chance, I would like to make a video and talk about why Kane is drawn. The characteristics of FF4 are that many characters appear and the story is more profound than previous works. It is a highly complete story about love with a lover, betrayal by a friend, separation from a friend, etc. In addition, active time battle has become a staple in FF. This battle system was introduced in FF4. Compared to the traditional turn system, this system, which progresses in real time, was accepted by many fans. It influenced many works, including the later released Chrono Trigger. But, when ATB first came out, here were pros and cons. While the battles were fast and exhilarating, some users felt that the difficulty was too high. Therefore, an easy version was released later. FF4 also has a famous episode related to its development. Employees independently developed it while sleeping at the company. This is what Tokita, who was also the main developer of FF4, said in an interview. However, it seems that the staff did not work reluctantly despite being exhausted. The staff seemed to have a good atmosphere, such as having a drink party together if the work took until late. Tokita says that after midnight, several staff members would play Nintendo's Dr. Mario against each other. When I hear stories like this today, it sounds like a company with a bad environment, but I think it was normal for Japanese companies back then. However, I think that's the best part because everyone seemed to be enjoying their work. It seems that the development staff at the time always had Dragon Quest in mind. For this reason, it is said that FF wanted to make a bigger impact than DQ. Initially, FF4 was planned for the NES and FF5 was planned for the SNES. However, production of FF4 for the NES was discontinued, and the game that was scheduled to be released as FF5 was sold as FF4. The desire to release a good work may have made FF4 a masterpiece. In 1992, the fifth game in the series, FF5 was released. FF4 was also popular, but FF5 sales increased even more. Total domestic sales were approximately 2.45 million, more than 1 million more than FF4. FF5 became the first FF series to reach double million. It was the 8th best-selling SNES software in Japan. The main character of this work is Bartz. Crystals around the world are destroyed, and the Dark Wizard X-Death is revived. The story of this work is to defeat X-Death and save the world. For the first time, character expressions have been added, allowing to enjoy the story even more. Another feature is that there are many items that are difficult to obtain just by playing normally. There are more elements to play with, and the official book is also thicker. In addition, the job change system that appeared in FF3 has been adopted, and has evolved further, allowing for a high degree of freedom in how to play. This system is the biggest feature of FF5. Can now select and change from over 20 types of jobs, and the skills have learned can now be selected when selecting another job. The combination of Ninja's dual wield and Ranger's rapid fire was so powerful that it disrupted the game balance. Also, Omega and Shinryu, which is stronger than the last boss, is famous. Omega and Shinryu suddenly appears in the middle of the last dungeon, but I think many players struggled with their strength. Battle at the Big Bridge, which plays during the scene where Gilgamesh appears, became so famous that it was used in subsequent works. In 1994, FF6, the last FF series software for the SNES, was released. In a world where magic has been lost, the Gestalian Empire aims to conquer the world. This is a story in which multiple protagonists fight to thwart the ambitions of the Gestalian Empire. FF6 was the only FF whose list price exceeded 10,000 yen. However, the sales record of FF5 was further broken, with sales of approximately 2.55 million. FF6 was developed by a team of 30 people, which is unusual for an RPG. As the story progresses, the world becomes devastated to the point of collapse. However, it seems that the original plan was not to tell a story of the world being devastated. The plan was to defeat Kefka before that happens and reach the ending. However, production progressed faster than expected, so it appears that the story was extended. There's a scene with Celes and Cid right after the world collapses. Can save Cid in this scene, but as play normally, Cid will die. I think there are many players who were unable to save Cid because there are no hints on how to save him. The route in which Cid dies was considered to be a normal story, so it seems that the route in which Cid can be saved was intentionally set to be difficult. FF6 is an omnibus story with multiple protagonists. I think this story was probably influenced by Dragon Quest IV. Each of the main characters in FF6 has a profound story, and the story of the work as a whole has a very deep content. 3 works released as SNES software. These became even more popular than the 3 games from the NES era and solidified the popularity of the FF. And the popularity of the FF series will further accelerate with subsequent works. In 1994, PlayStation was released. Until then, the TV game market had been dominated by SNES, but that changed dramatically with the advent of PS. From the FF series, FF7 appeared, and other masterpieces such as Xenogears and DQ7 were created as software for PS. The FF series has also entered an era where it is the most popular of the series. In 1997, FF7 was released as the first PS software. In Japan, I think FF7 is still the most popular of the FF series. Also, from this era, images that were previously drawn in 2D began to be drawn in 3D CG. As a result, FF7 evolved into a FF with a worldview unlike any previous work. Sales in Japan were approximately 4 million, far exceeding that of its predecessor, FF6. Now, it has become a monster title with cumulative sale of over 10 million. Until then in the FF series, the period until the next title was released was usually within 2 years. However, FF7 took about 3 years to complete. It is likely that it took time to change to 3D and make other adjustments. The production of FF7 reportedly cost millions of yen to modify just 1 second of footage. There are secret stories behind the production, such as how they headhunted talented staff and completed the opening in just 2 months, which at the time was said to take several years. FF7 wasn't just a hit in Japan. At the time, Japanese RPGs were unpopular overseas, but FF7 became popular, especially in North America. For example, FF7 was featured on a US news site called Reddit. I had never been impressed by a video game until I played FF7. At that time, there was a comment like this. It can be said that FF7 was an important turning point in making FF a globally popular series. In 1999, FF8 was released. Due to the commercial success of FF7, the budget for FF8's development was doubled. As explained in another video, the story of this work is the most difficult and profound in FF history. Domestic sales were approximately 3.7 million, making it a hit, although it was not as good as FF7. Although it is currently a hit with a cumulative total of nearly 10 million sold, it was not well received at the time of its release. Many players at the time said, "This game is crap." This is how I think about the reason why FF8 was unpopular. The story is too difficult to understand, and Rinoa has a personality that is not typical of a heroine. These two systems are novel and interesting, but it takes a little bit of effort to understand them. Graphics have been significantly improved. Even though it's only been about 2 years since FF7, I think this evolution is amazing. After it was released for the PlayStation, FF began to draw characters more realistically. Why did FF start drawing characters so realistically? Nomura, who was involved in character design, said, "Thought it would be easier to get people who don't play video games interested if it was drawn realistically." Until FF6, the worldview was like medieval Europe, but FF7 and 8 have a worldview of the near future. However, witches appear in FF8 so as not to spoil the fantasy nature. Since the Wizard of Oz is the motif, Witch of the West and Witch of the East will appear. This is what director Kitase was talking about. FF8 has a very difficult story. If you watch these two videos distributed on this channel, you will deepen your understanding of the difficult story of FF8. Please take a look. In 2000, the final PS version of FF9 was released. Perhaps due to the unpopular reception of its predecessor, FF8, domestic sales were around 2.8 million, significantly lower than its predecessor. However, contrary to sluggish sales, it received high praise from players. It won awards in 3 categories at the 5th Japan Game Awards. Received awards in 5 categories at the PlayStation Award. In the event that determined the ranking of PS software that year, won first place. The theme of FF9's story was Return to the Origins. FF6-8 was written in a cyberpunk worldview, but FF9 returned to a story with strong fantasy elements in a medieval European worldview. This is the story of Zidane and his friends fighting to stop Kuja's rampage. Also, since this work aims to return to its roots, multiple homages to past works will appear. For example, Garland that appears in FF9 is based on the final boss of FF1, Garland. In Evil Forest, can listen to Rufus' Welcoming Ceremony March, one of the BGMs of FF7. FF9 is a set of 4 discs, but it seems like they had a hard time making the content fit on 4 discs. Wanted to include more episodes and stories, but due to play time and disk space issues, shortened the stories. If larger capacity discs had existed at the time, the story might have been different. Currently, plans are underway to make an anime version of FF9 overseas. Maybe the anime version will include episodes that weren't shown at the time. The Japanese game industry has changed from the PS to the PS2 era. This allows for more beautiful visual expression. In 2001, FF10 was released as the first Final Fantasy for PS2. Domestic sales were approximately 3.2 million, successfully increasing sales from the previous work's poor performance. Sales continued to grow steadily after that, and are now the first Final Fantasy game for the PS2 to reach double million. This is the first work in the FF series to use these two systems. Facial emotion is a technology that changes a character's facial expression depending on the line or scene. This made it possible to express the character's complex psychology. It goes without saying that these two new systems have made Tidus and Yuna's love story even more moving. This happened when Kitase, who served as the director, was playing a game in private. Apparently, he once heard his parents tell him, "I don't know what kind of game you're playing. I want to create a game that conveys the content even to people who don't play games." Kitase seems to have thought this way when introducing character voices. There are some elements of FF10 that are still highly praised today. One of them is music. By expressing the characters' voices and facial expressions, they were able to create music that emphasizes melody. There are many famous songs in FF10's music, like this particular song. In particular, I think Desanerkand is a wonderful piece of music that still captures the hearts of FF fans. By the way, it seems that the BGM for Last Battle took many weeks to create, but the BGM of Normal Battle, which had a shorter production period, received better reviews. It seems that composer Uematsu regretted this. In 2002, FF11, the first MMORPG in the FF series, was released. MMORPG means online RPG. Apparently it was Sakaguchi's idea to turn FF into an online RPG, but Ishii, who was involved in the development of FF 1-3, opposed Sakaguchi's idea. Ishii said that he told Sakaguchi, "I don't want to go back to FF now." However, Sakaguchi told him to try EverQuest and then think about it, so Ishii played EverQuest. Then Ishii thought, "I think I can do what I wanted to do with this," and the first Final Fantasy MMORPG was born. Before that, MMORPGs were mainly PC games. But FF11 was sold as PS2 software. In order to connect the PS2 to the Internet, a special device called the PlayStation BB unit was required. Furthermore, it was a time when Internet connections were not as common as they are now. Although there were some difficulties in its release, it became a big hit as Final Fantasy's first MMORPG. But the system was completely different from traditional FF, and there were various problems, so it was criticized. On the other hand, there were also opinions that the feel and battle system of early MMORPGs were interesting. Services for the PS2 version and Xbox 360 version are currently discontinued. These 5 titles, released after the PS, made the FF series unshakable in popularity. In particular, FF7 and FF10 are still supported by many fans. By the way, my favorite FF is FF8. In 2001, the American film Final Fantasy was released. But it ended up incurring a loss of approximately $50 million. Sakaguchi, who directed this movie and served as the director of FF for many years, took responsibility and resigned from Square after FF10-2. As time progressed, PS2's successors, PS3 and PS4, appeared. As a result, many games with more beautiful images and more power than before have appeared. But this was the era after Sakaguchi, who had supported FF until then, left Square. Final Fantasy, which was released after that, received harsh reviews across the board. I'm sure everyone has their own preferences, but I'll explain the reasons why each work was poorly received, including general reasons. In 2006, FF12, the final Final Fantasy for PS2, was released. Sales in the first week of release were approximately 1.76 million, which is on par with FF10. But users' evaluations were completely different from FF10. It was originally intended to be a small-scale online simulation game. However, the company decided to make a FF, so the project that was in progress was developed as FF12. The story of this work is based on the same worldview as FF Tactics called Ivalice Alliance. It is a battle between the main characters Vaughn and his friends to take back the kingdom of Dalmasca, which was occupied by the Empire. The story was a bit difficult to understand, and although it was well received by some users, it was criticized by many. The system used in this work, called Gambits, was to have AI perform operations during battle. I think many users were confused about the controls, probably because there wasn't enough explanation during play. This may be the reason for the poor reviews of this work. However, this system allows detailed settings, so you can play around with various settings. It may have been highly rated by users who are familiar with computer operations such as programming. A system called Seamless Battle is used to create exhilarating battles. FF12 is a PS2 software like FF10 and FF11, but the graphics are much more beautiful. It seems that it was extremely difficult to make the graphics beautiful within the PS2's limited capacity. Final Fantasy XII was unpopular in Japan, but is popular overseas. Overseas PRGs generally have a system where you decide the role of your character. That's why FF12, which allows for detailed settings, was highly rated. In 2009, FF13, the first FF game for the PS3, was released. Sales in the first week of sales in Japan were approximately 1.51 million, which was about half that of FF12. In this work, there is a godlike being called Falsi. The story begins with an attempt to rescue Sarah, who has been given powers by Falsi. There are two possible reasons why FF13 was unpopular. There is little freedom of operation, and there are many technical terms that make the story difficult to understand. The story progresses slowly and there is little freedom of play. The structures of the dungeons were similar, and the same scenery continued over and over again, resulting in many users getting bored. Another feature of FF13 is that there are many coined words. Many such coined words appeared in the story, and many users were confused. Lassie from Pulse's Falsi is Cocoon in Purge. Even if a line like this comes out, you wouldn't know what it meant. Cocoon is a planet-like world floating in the sky, and a place where people live. Pulse is a land outside of Cocoon that is shunned by the people of Cocoon. Falsi is a being that is beyond human comprehension and is feared and worshipped by people. Lassie is a person chosen from Falsi. It is said that those who fulfill their role become crystals, and those who fail become seeth. Purge means to be purged from Cocoon. In other words, being expelled from Cocoon. It's hard to understand the story with all these neologisms. Although the coined word has been explained, the story itself is difficult to understand, so it is still difficult to understand. FF13 is the first trilogy in the series, and it's an epic story, so it's a waste. The game received high praise from users for its beautiful graphics and fast-paced battles. The battle scenes are exquisitely balanced so that they can be set up strategically but unfold quickly. Another interesting point is that as the number of friends increases, the number of cooperative attack patterns increases. Although the battle was highly rated, I think the difficult story and lack of freedom of action were the reasons for the low rating. In 2010, FF14 was released as a PC version. This is first MMORPG work since FF11. Although it is now a hit all over the world, it received very low reviews immediately after its release. When FF14 was just released, had to buy an expensive, high-spec computer. But many users bought expensive computers and tried playing games, only to find that they were not at all fun. The graphics are now high quality with even the smallest details. But in the end, even the wooden boxes and bases ended up having enough capacity for one character. As a result of paying too much attention to detail, FF14 lost 1 billion yen. Wada, who was CEO at the time, even had to publicly apologize to users. However, FF14 later made a huge comeback and became a worldwide hit. I'll tell you more about that process later. In 2016, FF15 was released for PS4. Can see that the number of sales in the first week of release in Japan was about 690,000, which was a significant drop. However, it has sold more than 10 million worldwide, and unlike in Japan, it has received high praise overseas. This is the reason why this work was unpopular. The story is messy and there are a lot of bugs. In particular, many people commented that there were too many bugs. The screen gets stuck at a strange angle, or regalia suddenly disappears from the screen. Some bugs will make you laugh. But the number of bugs in this game caused stress to many users. Also, there are many opinions that this story is not very well done. The heroine barely appears and is suddenly killed off, and there are almost no episodes involving characters other than the main characters. This work is sometimes ridiculed as the black history of the FF series. However, there are some aspects that are being evaluated. As it was developed as a PS4 software, the beauty of the graphics has been greatly improved. Additionally, FF15's battle system is different from previous FF. Fight using a teleportation technique called warp and a defensive technique called parry. At the end of FF15, the new logo depicts Noctis and Lunafreya finally united. This seems to have been a request from Suzuki, who was in charge of Noctis' voice actor, and I'm sure many users were moved by this production. FF15 was originally developed as FF vs 13. However, due to the wishes of Square Enix, it was changed to be released as FF15 halfway through. This is the reason behind the long development period of FF15. Although FF15 had strong sales worldwide, its reputation in Japan was very low. Final Fantasy has completely fallen into disrepair. There were many such opinions. Personally, I think that the spin-off works released after FF15 are good works. I think Episode Arden is particularly well done. I would like to make a separate video about this work. Will Final Fantasy, which saved Square from the brink of bankruptcy, continue to fall from grace? There are two works that led the FF series, which had fallen into a predicament, to a comeback. These are Reborn FF14 and FF7R. FF14 brought about the second management crisis for the company. However, thanks to Yoshida's skill, the problems were gradually improved. Yoshida was entrusted with the company's decision on what to do with FF14 after that. At that time, these were the two plans for what to do with FF14. After much consideration, Yoshida decided to restart FF14. Until Reborn FF14 was developed, old FF14 service was discontinued. The ending of this game, which was said to be bad, was amazing. Let me briefly talk about the ending of old FF14. One of the two stars that existed in the world falls to the ground and the world comes to an end. This is called the Meteor Project and is reminiscent of the story of FF7. This content was apparently inspired by a TV program that Yoshida watched. Bahamut appears from a meteorite and destroys the world. Reborn FFXVI is revealed as the dawn of a new world. The bold decision to rebuild FF14 from scratch is paying off. Reborn FF14 overturned the harsh reviews it received up until then and gained over 25 million users worldwide. On the evaluation site Metacritic, Endwalker, a part of this work, received high praise. These are very high scores. I think this reversal from the heavily criticized old FF14 is as dramatic as the FF story. This work is also made with special attention to music. It simulates the situation in which a user plays a game, and the settings include changing songs every few seconds. I believe that the great turnaround in FF14 is the result of the hard work of the staff. And there were probably many users who reconsidered and thought, the era of Final Fantasy is far from over. Reborn FF the 14th of May be the beginning of a new era for the FF series. And FF's reversal is not limited to Reborn FF14. In 2020, FF7R, the first remake of FF7, was released. FF7, the most popular and even legendary of the FF series, has been revived with today's technology. It's a nostalgic game for those who played the original FF7 in the past. I think it will be refreshing for users playing for the first time. One of the differences from the original version is the introduction of a new combat system. Although the battle system has a strong action feel, the game has a finish that also allows you to feel the battle elements of traditional RPGs. Whispers is a new mysterious entity that has appeared. It was the first remake version that left quite a bit of mystery, such as the 7 seconds before the end scene. I'm really looking forward to the second and third remakes that will be released in the future. The release of the FF7 remake as a trilogy caused controversy. However, with so many new elements added to the story, many users can't wait to see what happens next. In addition, there are currently various opinions being exchanged by fans in Japan. This work is a story in parallel worlds, and the hypothesis is that it is a story with a different world axis than original FF7. In the remake, some say there should be a way for Aerith to survive, and are hoping for a story in which she doesn't die. The FF13 trilogy unfolded a story that transcended parallel worlds and time and space. The directors of FF7 Remake are staff members who served as directors for the FF13 trilogy, so this hypothesis cannot be denied. In any case, there is no doubt that I can't wait for the next work. FF16 was released in June of this year, 2023. This is the first FF work since FF15 that is not a refurbished work or a remake work. In terms of regaining trust in the FF brand that was lost with FF15, it can be said that it is a more important work than a reborn FF14 or FF7R. So far, I feel that user reactions in Japan are mixed. However, since it has just been released, I would like to create a video at a later date about my thoughts and behind-the-scenes stories about the production. This time, we look back at the first FF to the latest FF16 all at once. I couldn't talk about each work for a long time, but I would like to gradually create new videos about them. Each work in the FF series feels even more interesting when you play through a long lineage, rather than feeling each one individually. For example, FF8 has an underlying theme of irresistible fate, but because of this, the story was difficult to understand and was unpopular. For this reason, FF9 is created with the theme of returning to basics and has a simple story that everyone can enjoy. After some time has passed, the theme of fate that was treated in FF8 was once again depicted in the FF13 trilogy. That theme continues in the story of FF15 and is also depicted in the new game FF16. In this way, there are some interesting points that can notice by watching the series throughout. Would like to continue to deliver the appeal of various games in the future. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching.